A wealthy stranger offered the village everything they wanted. All he asked for was one small thing. They said yes. That was the mistake. The village of Soro had stood for 300 years, at the junction of two rivers, not the largest, not the wealthiest, not the most famous, but Wakin by every measure that actually matters, a good place to live. Its people knew each other, not just by name, but by story, by history, by the particular way communities know each other, when they have shared enough time and difficulty to have become genuinely each other's people. They gathered every evening in the village square, not because they were required to, but because they wanted to. The square, with its ancient Oroko tree and worn stone benches, was where life happened, where news was shared, disputes settled, stories told, where children learned who they were and where they came from, where old people died surrounded by everyone who knew them, which is the best way to die. Then on an ordinary afternoon, a stranger arrived, Kwame Asante, a successful merchant from the capital, with an eye for opportunity. He had been watching Soro from a distance, seeing not what it was, but what it could become if you changed a few things. He went to the chief with gifts and a carefully constructed proposal. Your village sits at the junction of two great rivers. I would like to build a trading post here. I can bring wealth beyond what you have imagined. All I ask is permission to build, and a few small adjustments. Just small things. Nothing that would disturb the character of the village. The chief called the council. Elders discussed for 3 days. Old Mama Afua said quietly, "Ask him to name the small things. Before you agree to them, always name the price before you make the trade. Even when the seller calls it small," the chief asked. Asante named 3 things. They were, by any measure, small. The council agreed, and Soro made its first trade. The first change, market days extended from 3 to 5. Money from 2 extra days immediately visible. Cost, 2 days less rest, 2 days less rhythm. Not visible, not yet. The second change, warehouse in Western Square section, where the stone benches were. The benches were just stone, the space just space. The warehouse brought significant income. What they did not understand, what they could not have understood until it happened, was that the Western section with its stone benches was where the old people sat every evening, had always sat, for 300 years. And the old people sitting there, visible in the shared life, was not just aesthetic, it was structural. It was how young people knew the old were still relevant. It was how old people stayed connected. When the warehouse went up, the old people found the eastern section less familiar, less theirs, and slowly in over 6 months, stopped coming. And the children grew up without old people visible, which meant they grew up without the stories, without the casual wisdom, without the organic transmission of who Soro was. The third change, Asante offered wages higher than farming paid. Young men, seeing opportunity, took it, which was rational, reasonable, made economic sense. Within 3 years, 60% of young men worked for Asante. The farm, which had fed Soro for 300 years, thinned. Some left fallow, some sold to Asante for reasonable prices. The food Soro had always grown, Soro now bought. From supply chains, efficient, reliable, slightly more expensive, not significantly, not enough to worry about, not yet. Then the healers. Asante brought a medical post from the capital, more effective for certain things. The healers found patients going elsewhere, stopped teaching their daughters as thoroughly, because what was the point of learning something no longer needed? And Soro's 300-year relationship with its own land, its own plants, its own remedies, its own knowledge of itself, began to thin, like a river in the dry season. Still there, but less and less and less. The profitable years came, better houses, repaired roads, good school, but school teaching useful skills, literacy, numeracy, trade, and gradually less of the other things, stories, histories, songs, ceremonies, the specific ways of doing things that were Soro's ways. Not because anyone decided to stop teaching them. Nobody made that decision. It happened through the accumulation of small choices. each one reasonable, each one responding to immediate need. In year 7, a young man was asked, "What are Soro's founding stories?" He thought, for a long time. "We were at the junction of 2 rivers," he said, "and we were good at trading." "Is that all?" "I think so," he said, and was not sure why that answer felt thin. He just knew, in some part he couldn't quite reach, that it was the Harvest Festival, which had always been 3 days, lasted 1 day, because the working week could not accommodate 3, and families tried to compress 3 days of ceremony into 1, and found that ceremony cannot be compressed. That meaning lives in the duration. That evening, Mama Afua stood in what remained of the village square, smaller than it had been. 10 years ago, I asked the chief to name the price before making the trade. He did. The price named was small, but the price paid was everything that lived inside those small things. Everything connected to them. Everything that depended on them, which we could not see, because you cannot see what something holds until you have removed it. And by then, it is already gone. We traded market days and lost our rest, our rhythm, our relationship with time. We traded the Western Square and lost our elders, our stories, our children's sense of where they came from. We traded our farms and lost our knowledge of our land, our healers' reason to teach. We traded a little and a little and a little until we had traded everything, and none of us can point to the moment we did it, because we did not do it in a moment. We did it in 1,000 moments, each one small, each one reasonable, but together they added up to something none of us would have agreed to if asked for it all at once. This is how it works. This is always how it works. You do not lose your soul in one trade. You lose it in 1,000 small ones. The village was quiet. Then the chief asked, "What do we do?" Mama Fua's answer was harder. Some things could be recovered, some could not. The farms, the market days, the square could be reclaimed if the village decided, but the stories not told for 10 years lived only in people who remembered, and those people were getting older. The plant knowledge not taught for 10 years lived only in women who still knew, and those women were getting older. Start today with what is still here, with the people who still know, before they are gone, and the knowing is gone with them. The reclamation began quietly. Old Akosua teaching plant knowledge again, to any young woman who would sit and listen. Not many, but some, and some was enough to begin. Old Mensa telling the founding stories. At the smaller but still present evening gathering, the chief spoke to Asante. "Soro has terms now. The market returns to 3 days. The Western Square is returned. We will work with you, not for you. And those are different things." Asante nodded, because a village that knows its terms is a better partner than one that does not, in the long run. Old Tortoise sat on the first restored stone bench, and the village gathered, not because required to, but wanting to. "What did you learn?" Tortoise asked. "Chief, that we did not know what we had until we were losing it." Mama Fua, that the price is never only what the seller names. Akosua, that knowledge lives in people, not buildings, not money, and what cannot be taught does not exist. Tortoise spoke. "You were not attacked, not conquered, not forced. You were offered, and you accepted. Reasonably, rationally, one small thing at a time. And that is the most important part, because it means it can happen again, to any community not paying attention to what it is, and what it is slowly agreeing to become. The question every community must ask every generation is not, are we prosperous? It is, are we still ourselves? Do we still know our stories? Do we still practice our ceremonies? Do we still gather, not because required, but because we want to? Do our children know where they come from? Do our old people still sit in the square? These are not nostalgic questions. These are survival questions. You do not lose your soul in one trade. You lose it in 1,000 small ones. Pay attention to what you are trading. Before you agree, all of it, not just the part they tell you about. Name the full price. before you say yes. Whatever you are building, whatever community you belong to, whatever identity you carry, pay attention to the small trades, the ones that seem reasonable, that seem harmless, because you do not lose your soul in one trade, you lose it in 1,000 small ones. And you only notice when you look up one day and realize you are somewhere you never agreed to be, because you agreed to it one small step at a time. Pay attention. Subscribe to Africa Untold, where every story carries a lesson. Stay wise, stay strong. Africa Untold.